What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Hope you're all doing well, and thanks so much for taking the time out of your day to click here on another video. And today we're going to be talking about Freakier Friday. Directed by Nisha, this film stars people like Jamie Lee Curtis, Lindsay Lohan, Julia Butters, Sophie Hammond, Manny Jacinto, and more. So here we are, over 20 years after the release of Freaky Friday that stars Jamie Lee Curtis and Lindsay Lohan, which has kind of become the definitive version of this story. It was originally a film from the 70s and of course was remade into this film, and there's been a Disney Channel original movie remake and other iterations of Freaky Friday-esque stories. But when people think of Freaky Friday, they think of this one. And kudos to Lindsay Lohan, because there's another Disney film from the past that she also remade in the 90s known as The Parent Trap, that a lot of times people tend to think of that movie as well as the original. Nobody ever really talks about the originals from the 70s and 60s. They specifically mention the Lindsay Lohan film. So here we are all these years later. Lindsay Lohan and Jamie Lee Curtis are back together in this film to tell a new story within the world of their Freaky Friday iteration. So before we get into my thoughts on the film though, let's get into what this film is all about. Tess and Anna, played by Jamie Lee Curtis and Lindsay Lohan, are back. Older, wiser, but still prone to magical chaos. When Anna's daughter Harper and her soon-to-be stepdaughter Lily clash, a mysterious fortune teller triggers a four-way body swap, and now Tess, Anna, Harper, and Lily must live in each other's shoes and untangle the mess before Anna's wedding. So full transparency, when I heard that this film was being made, I was pretty excited. The original film came out when I was about 10 years old, so of course it came out right at that perfect time for me to watch the movie plenty of times, enjoy it. I remember seeing it in theaters, and I remember seeing it many times on Disney Channel or renting it, and I think we owned it at some point. It was just one of those movies I watched many times as a kid. I actually hoped to revisit it and do a video on it before getting around to this, but as I've said a couple of times this year, I just feel like there's so many legacy sequels and so many franchises releasing these like big sequels that there's so many franchises I wanted to cover the older installments of this year, but I just haven't gotten around to it. But I'd like to at some point. But I remember having so much fun with that movie as a kid, so when I heard that this film was coming, I was pretty excited. Now, also full transparency, when I saw the trailer, I was kind of put off. The trailer looked like it was going for bigger and better, but it to me looked like it could be bigger and messier. And so going into the film, I was a little bit worried. It wasn't one of those situations where you have a legacy sequel with legacy stars and I feel just outright excitement. There was some hesitancy going into this film. I had a bad feeling that it was just going to be this big sloppy mess. And I'll start this off by saying I actually quite enjoyed this film. While I don't think Freakier Friday is as good as Freaky Friday, I don't think it has the same level of charm and long-lasting storytelling that I think people will think of years down the line. I do think it does a good job of honoring the original. I think it does a good job of playing off of that original, doing something new and different here, while also maintaining the idea of the whole body swap thing. In a lot of ways, like a lot of other legacy franchises, a lot of legacy sequels or sequels that come way down the line, it does what a lot of them do. It takes the original film and kind of flips it on its head with a lot of similarities and moments that echo other moments from the original film, but have their own slight edge to them. And for the most part, I think that that's exactly what you have here with Freakier Friday. It's just another iteration of Freaky Friday that calls back to tons of moments from that first film with Jamie Lee Curtis and Lindsay Lohan, but has enough of its own energy because it has four people that are involved this time, but also has enough of its own energy to give itself its own identity. Now, with that said, there were things I liked about the films and things I didn't like about the film, but what I could say on an overall level is that I think that this film does have heart. It does have that charm that you would want from it, and I think Jamie Lee Curtis and Lindsay Lohan are fantastic in this film. It's great to see Lindsay Lohan in a movie again. I know she's kind of popped up in some like Hallmark movies and some smaller TV shows over the course of the last few years, but if you know anything about her, she went through a bit of a rough patch, so to see her back on the big screen in a big movie was great. I thought she was fantastic. It felt like she slipped right back into the role, and it felt like she was like the old Lindsay Lohan. Like, I felt very much nostalgic watching her in this film, and she still looks great. And alongside her, you have Jamie Lee Curtis, who in recent years has still been incredibly beloved and has been in tons of big movies and television shows, whether it be in the Halloween franchise or in something silly like Everything Everywhere All at Once, and all sorts of other things. She's been a consistent name, and so we already know Jamie Lee Curtis is great, but it's their chemistry that makes the two of them in this film work so well. I really enjoyed the time spent with both of these characters. I really enjoyed the chemistry that came from the two of them. You could tell they had a lot of fun reuniting to make this movie. And one part I was worried about is that, as I've already mentioned in the synopsis, you have Lindsay Lohan's daughter in the film and her soon-to-be a stepdaughter, who are also involved in all this, who are played by Sophia Hammonds and Julia Butters, who, based on the trailer, I was a little worried about, but I'm happy to say I thought they were really good here. They definitely bring a lot of charm to the movie, and as the movie plays out and you get further into the movie, I found myself really engaged with all four characters, and I think it was interesting to see them all having to play off of one another. And so I thought that the performances there were really great, leaning into the comedy that you want from a body swap film like this, but also I thought that when the moments needed emotion, that all four of them were able to bring that emotion to the forefront of their characters, which easily made the film a lot more connectable, a lot more relatable, which is what I wanted. I found myself having those moments where I was feeling a little bit of that, teary-eyed feeling. There was those moments where I felt that the film was tugging on the heartstrings, even if it does feel reminiscent of the original, even if it is doing reminiscent story beats of the original. I think it's all about how it's executed, and despite that familiarity, I think it was ultimately all really well done, and our four main leads are without a doubt the main reason that that's the case. And outside of them, you also have Manny Jacinto in here as Eric, who is the love interest, who's kind of blind to everything that's going on throughout the course of the film as they're trying to navigate this upcoming wedding, and the fact that these two young girls don't want their parents to get married, so they're trying to find a way to separate them amidst being in these different bodies. And so you have Manny Jacinto here, who I only really know personally as the stranger and the best part of Star Wars The Acolyte, so it was nice to see him here in a completely different kind of thing. I know he's been in other things, but the only thing I'd ever seen him in was in The Acolyte, and I loved him as the stranger. I thought he was a really cool character, so to see him in this kind of like silly comedy was a lot of fun. I thought he was a good part of the film, and there are moments with him as well in the latter half of the film where they are able to kind of tap into a little bit more emotion with this character, whereas before he just kind of seemed like the silly soon-to-be stepdad that kind of was just goofing around in a lot of these sequences or didn't know what was going on around him, and he's just kind of like going with the flow. But by the time you get to the end, they do a good job of giving his character a little bit more weight. Outside of those characters, you also have some big returning cast members like Chad Michael Murray and some other faces in the mix that surprised me that came back from the original film in brief roles, but they do come back. And there was also some faces from previous Lindsay Lohan Disney movies that also appear here as well, which I thought was a pretty cool hint and nod to the fans. With all of that said, I mentioned that I had positives and I had negatives. And when it comes down to the negatives, despite the fact that I felt that this film had the charm, had that whimsical element to it that allowed me to kind of feel a little bit of emotion by the time we got to the end, and that our cast is really strong here, I do think there are moments where this film goes for bigger, and I don't necessarily know if it goes for better. At times the humor is funny, and at times it feels like it's very much a movie made for my generation as a sequel. It feels like it's supposed to feel like early 2000s cheese and cringe humor at times, and very much feels like it's supposed to be playing off of that era of filmmaking. On the same token, though, it does at times feel like the film is trying to kind of cater to a new generation as well. So at times I felt the humor clash. There were moments where I found the humor to be really funny and charming, but there were other moments that it ultimately came off cringe in the wrong way. And something else I kind of got tired of as we got later on into the film was the age discrepancy element. I think when you look at the original film, when you look at the base idea here, there's a lot of fun that can come from the notion that you have younger characters and older characters' bodies, but by the time you get 40-50 minutes into the film, the two groups kind of complaining about how young or old they are, it was a little bit annoying. It wasn't all that funny at a certain point. It felt like we were kind of running on the same gags. There's also a lot of references to the different generations, millennials, Gen Z, Gen X, boomers, and while some of that was funny, I do feel at times that the age jokes kind of just ran their course, but there are still a few of them in there that are pretty funny in the right moments. These moments in particular, one where you have the young characters inside of Jamie Lee Curtis and they crouch down and they're like trying to stand up and they don't understand why they can't. That was funny. Or another sequence where as the younger characters that with the older people inside their bodies, there's times where they would fall over and they feel like they're invincible. They don't even know what it was like to feel like that, or they can eat whatever they want. Little moments like that were kind of funny to kind of see them dealing with the age, but at times when they were referencing the age over and over again, it did get a little bit tiresome. There's also a lot that this film tries to jam pack into its story, because it's not only about the fact that they're body swapping, but you have this marriage element in the mix, which is similar to the original film as well. I mean, you have this pop star element that's happening because Lindsay Lohan's character is a music manager, so she is managing a pop star, And while that pop star element does have a big piece to the third act of the film, it did oftentimes feel like it was detracting from the overall journey of our 4 characters throughout the course of the movie. And so that was something else that I felt was just a little bit too much. And throughout the course of the film, there was a handful of moments where I felt like, do we really need this storyline? Do we really need this character? Or there were characters that I wish we would have spent a little bit more time with that felt like they were just tacked on there because they're characters from the original film, and less so because they really had much to do with them in this film. Still though, I think if you're a fan of the 2000s Freaky Friday and you like Jamie Lee Curtis and Lindsay Lohan, the two of them back together is great here in this film. There's a lot of chemistry, a lot of heart, a lot of charm, some great funny moments with the two of them. It was great to see them again. Honestly, I could watch another one of these though. I don't think we necessarily need it, but it was great to see. There's some nice little Easter eggs and cameos in there for fans of the original film, and there's just some fun moments in here that are going to tug on the heartstrings, despite the fact that I do think at times the humor doesn't always land and that the film does feel a little over bloated with its narrative. I think at times they could have cut some things down and focused up on a couple of other things, but ultimately by the time the movie came to an end, I was quite surprised that a film that the trailers kind of put me off on had me pretty pulled in, and I felt happy. And I also want to say that the film goes from credits into bloopers, and I just missed the era of bloopers. It left me feeling a little bit more on a high as we were leaving, because I was already on a high. I was enjoying the film in the third act, how it was kind of bringing everything together despite my, grievances. But then you go into the credits and bloopers start playing out, and you get to see these sequences in the film that were either funny or not so funny that are now added to their humor with these bloopers. I've always been a sucker for bloopers, and you just don't see it in movies anymore. So it was nice to see a film embrace the fun of the behind the scenes and kind of showing some of these sequences in the film earlier, like I just mentioned, that at times were funny and some that weren't that funny, but just kind of seeing them kind of flub the line or mess up a moment, and it made it funnier. It kind of gave that moment earlier in the film a little bit more charm, even if I didn't find it to be funny when I saw it in the film. I hope that makes sense. But either way, I think a lot of people have been calling for bloopers in recent years. It's nice to see the cast having fun on set. Sure, not every movie needs bloopers, especially if the tone doesn't call for it. Like, we don't need something like Oppenheimer having bloopers as the credits start to roll, but this was the perfect kind of movie to have a good time with, kind of have those nostalgic feeling moments of the original film, and then roll into the credits and get to see the cast having a little bit of fun for a few extra minutes, and kind of just reminding us all that this is all in good fun, which ultimately left me leaving this film thinking that was a good time. I enjoyed it. The kid inside of me had fun with it. The critic inside my mind ultimately recognizes that it's a little bit messy at times, but still a fun time. So that's going to be my thoughts on Freakier Friday, and the question is, are you planning on checking it out? Did you already check it out? Whatever the case may be, leave any and all comments down below, and I'll see you beautiful people in the next one. Bye-bye.